is going to be Stacey Boeke. I'll give her an introduction in just a second, but let me first explain a little bit what we're trying to do with these live streams. So many of you probably know that 8th Light, specifically 8th Light in Chicago, hosts a speaker series called 8th Light University. We've actually been running 8th Light University, I looked it up today, since 2013. So a good 7 years. We try to do bi-weekly meetups, and those as I mentioned, normally take place in the Chicago office, but due to global circumstances, we're not having any in-person events of any sort. So this initiative is a way to sort of extend what we were already previously offering, but in a web-only format. So another small difference between what we were doing with 8th Light University and what we're trying to do here is the talks that we're going to be giving during these live stream series, are going to be closer to what we offer as training that we normally do internally. So you get a little bit of a peek behind the curtain as to what we're learning. And one of our values here at 8th Light is that we share what we know, so that this is also a path towards doing that as well. We like to share what we know in the community, and these talks are going to be taking place once every 4 weeks. In between, we're also going to have other our normal 8th Light University meetups. So we usually have guest speakers that come in for that. But definitely look for these talks. You can see what's coming up next by either keeping up with our blog. We'll announce them on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and we also have a university page. So if you're following any one of those channels, or all of them hopefully, then you will see the events that we have coming up. But we're going to try to keep this every 2-week cadence, every 4-week cadence, every 4 weeks for this particular 8th Light University live stream thing. So normally when I do these introductions, I will do announcements, and our usual announcements are, we have food in the kitchen. Hopefully you have food in your own kitchen, and I don't need to tell you where the restrooms are because you're in your own house, hopefully. So without having to do those announcements, the other announcement that I would normally do is what we have coming up next. So I mentioned that the live streams are going to be every 4 weeks. We have a couple in between those. So our next live stream training event is going to be on the 8th of next month, so May 8th, and we're calling that Building Trust, Managing People Remotely. So that's going to be taking a lot from what we normally do as our manager training, but also adapting it to our current circumstances as working remotely. So in between that, so in 2 weeks, which is going to be on the 24th, we're going to be trying something a little bit different. It's called we're going to do an 8th Light University lunch break. So it'd be a smaller version. It's going to be more of a guided conversation. We've never done this before, so this is new. We'll try it out. But basically, we're just gonna connect. It's just an opportunity for us to connect with each other. We'll have some questions that we're gonna bring up, and just a discussion, a very lighthearted discussion. So hopefully you can join us for that. That'll be in 2 weeks. We'll post the details for that next week. So just keep an eye out on those channels that I mentioned. And then at the end of May, on the 22nd, another one of our 8th Light crafters here, Josh Campbell, is going to be presenting his talk on UML. It's going to be called, What Was UML? So hopefully we will see you for all of those events. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and we will be happy. I think we also have a contact form on our website, and we will be happy to answer whatever questions you have. Speaking of questions, we are using the Zoom webinar format. So the webinar format, everybody comes in, and I believe you are muted automatically. We don't have videos, so there's no hand raising either, but there is a Q&A section. I'll let Stacey talk a little bit about that, but if you have a question during the talk, please use that Q&A feature, and I will be keeping an eye on that, and I will let Stacey know as we go along what questions come up. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce Stacey. Obviously, you can see the title of our talk is No One Told You Remote Would Be This Way. Remote work would be this way. So let's, well, welcome Stacey. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Welcome, everyone. I wish we could see all of your smiling faces right now. I know it's tough to be sort of isolated in the way we are, but thank you for taking the time to come and learn from us today, with us today. So, and I appreciate the smiley emoji that I just got sent, so that's great. I'm the Learning and Development Specialist here at 8light, and I've been really lucky my whole career to have the option of working remotely at least a couple of days a week. I've also led remote teams and managed remote clients, and for a brief time was the sole Chicago office of a national nonprofit. Despite all of this, I know I came pretty unprepared for the situation that we're in today, despite all of this experience. So this series on remote work will hopefully give you some insights that can help set you up for success. So today we're going to be talking about how we make the best of this unusual situation. As Nicole mentioned, in a month, we'll have some tips and tricks for folks who are new to remote management. We've done some research about what makes great work environments and great managers, and no matter what the situation, remote or not. And we've gotten some tips and tricks from our experienced colleagues who have been fully remote for years. And so we'll be adding their insights in on top of the research that we've done. All right, so moving along here. And one moment as I get used to this new webinar software. Okay, so guidelines for today's call. If you have a question, I do believe there is a raise hand feature, so you can press that, or the Q&A / chat. Either of those places are fine for questions. Please go ahead and ask the questions as you go. And again, we discovered that video doesn't come on here, so you can ignore that last tip. We would have loved to see all of you. But so when I dreamed of, being able to work fully remote, I would have visions of something like this, or this, or this. But in reality, my remote space is more like this. So you probably all remember BBC Dad from a while ago. I pretty much feel like him every day, and don't be surprised if you see a guest appearance from my 8-year-old in the background at some point, as I am doing my this webinar here from her bedroom. I also know that a lot of you probably have workspaces that look like one of my colleagues, right? You've got your little one to your left, you've got your cats and dogs running around, you are making do in your space, and it's probably not in a quiet place. And so many of you are also dealing with coworkers who do things like this, and this, and this. And so many of us didn't have time to prepare. And even the most prepared of us, which is one of my amazing colleagues who transformed a closet into a beautiful workplace, but we weren't prepared to be locked in the house with roommates and pets and children all by ourselves for God knows until when. And I've seen the meme going around like this. In case you've lost track, today is April 97th. I don't know what day it is. I'm pretty sure it's Friday. That's about what I know. So when you walk away today, I'm hoping that you'll get an understanding of the benefits and challenges of remote work. You'll design your best possible remote work environment, and you'll have strategies that you can immediately apply for communication and collaboration. So benefits and challenges of remote work. I am wondering if folks could, in the chat, add some things that you think are benefits of remote work. And don't worry, I won't call on you to expand, but if you want to add some thoughts about what you think the benefits are of remote work. No transit time, no travel, the pets get more attention, flexible to do homework, have time for sport, not getting the COVID. Yep, yep, the flexibility, all the cats. That's great. Yeah, I mean, oh, concentrating in your own space. Yep, that's great. Opportunities to improve my workspace. Yeah, I've been thinking about redecorating my whole house. No open offices. Yeah, that's another great one. Great. So yeah, so these are some of the things that we came up with as well. You know, other things that we noted, just more flexibility perhaps between start and end times, depending on your employer. You may have the flexibility to, you know, get up and get started working earlier than you normally would, or start later and work into evenings, or you're more attuned to your natural ebbs and flows throughout the day. I also think it saves money, right? You're no longer going out to lunch, you're no longer paying for gas, other work-related transit expenses, those are gone, so that's good. And certainly you're, you know, if you learn to work well remotely, you're less geographically bound, which may, you know, in the future, open you up for other opportunities and work in other locations, or being able to take opportunities you didn't have the chance. And of course, right, reduces the spread of illness. All right, so now the flip side. Anyone want to add what they think are some downfalls of remote work? Yeah, loneliness, losing the concept of time, office chair and lighting, yes, not getting out of the house. The whole thing is all bleeding together. Hard to focus on the day on hard problems. Yeah, developing those interpersonal relationships are a lot harder. Harder to focus, easier to eat. Yep. Yeah. There was a song from the 90s about every day being exactly the same, and I definitely feel that monotony for sure. Yeah, some other things that I've noticed for myself is just there's no like built-in exercise. At a minimum, if you're driving to work, you're walking from the parking lot to your desk. So just even getting out and getting moving requires a deliberate effort, especially now. Oh, that's an interesting one that I hadn't thought of, which is lots of different video tools, right? Everyone's juggling lots of different tools, particularly if your company hadn't normed on what you use for remote before all of this happened. That can be a challenge as well. I see this like just there's no separation between work and life. It all kind of blurs together and can feel messy. And no connection to your work community. It's interesting, like I've heard fellow introverts like me marvel at like how much we miss just having people around. We might not want to talk to you, but you know, we might not need water cooler talk, but just knowing your colleagues are around can be tough. And I can't imagine what our extroverted friends are feeling right now. And just communication patterns are different. You can't hunt someone down for an answer, right? Which might be a good thing, right? You can't physically get in their space, but you don't have those random interactions perhaps that spark new conversation. But all of these challenges really have the chance to become opportunity if we figure out how to make remote work. So if you can master the ins and outs of remote work, you'll ultimately be more flexible and more adaptable. So, so at Eighth Light, we use an emotional intelligence framework to think about how we interact with one another. And we encourage athletes to reflect on our understanding of our own needs and addressing them well, so that we can bring our best selves to the workplace. And so that's what we're going to be focusing a lot on here today, is the left-hand side of the emotional intelligence framework. So self-awareness and self-management. So self-awareness is recognizing your own moods, emotions, your drive, and what effect they have on others. And self-management is the ability to kind of control your own moods and impulses and ensure that you're interacting in a great way. And that can be tough to do when you've got these monotonous days that you're working through. And particularly the power of establishing a really strong daily routine is critical to being successful in establishing great working patterns. And so what I'm going to do right now actually is in the chat document, and going dark for a minute here. In the chat document, I'm going to share with you some virtual handouts that you can use. And hopefully these will be helpful for you as we go through this presentation. Okay. And my slide hopefully is back up, and Nicole or Jen will tell me if it's not. So
I see your slide.
Excellent, thank you. So I encourage you to open up that document, and the second page has some questions, and these are self-awareness questions that we encourage our crafters, our developers, and all of our staff to be thinking about. Is think about your daily routine. So what is the role of sleep in your success? Food, exercise, hobbies. What's the best work day you've had recently? What did it look like and how did it happen? When do you have your aha moments? So when are you really able to make breakthroughs? And then what are common distractions that happen during the day? So the answers to these questions, and I'm going to give you a few moments to reflect on these in a moment, but they can be really helpful. So the answers to the questions about food, exercise, hobbies help you think about, like, how do you structure your optimal work day, your pre and post work day? How can you design a day that respects some of those important needs? When you think about the best work day that you have had recently, or maybe before the pandemic started, what was that best work day? The answers to those questions might help you understand what you need to get into your flow state, which is where you lose your distractions, you're able to have uninterrupted time where you're super productive and happy. When do you have your aha moments? That might help you understand the importance of downtime or interrupted time. And then what are those common distractions? So they can be lovely distractions, like your dog wanting to give you cuddles. They could be not lovely distractions, like your dog stealing your son's Flamin' Hot Cheetos and the repercussions that come from that. Or it could be social media rabbit holes that are worse now that you're cooped up at home. It could be a distraction of needing to run an errand, right? So if you reflect on those, we'll take about 5 minutes, so until 12:59, to reflect on the questions that you see there in your workbook. We'll give everyone just another minute and then we'll keep going. So thinking about yourself, your needs, what makes your day great is really important self-care and really important self-awareness. And so figuring out how to get those needs met throughout the day is important to helping you be able to interact well with your colleagues. So as we go through the rest of the presentation, hopefully you'll hear tips that might help you establish effective daily routines that will allow you to fill in the other side of the box in the worksheet. What are some practices that you can put in place to make sure that you're getting what you need when you're working in a remote environment that will allow you to bring your best self to the virtual office? So once you've identified, and actually before I move on to this next topic, I just wanted to pause for a moment to allow folks to ask questions if they have any. Okay. And of course, ask questions as you move along. Okay, as we move along. So using time blocking for deep work. So thinking about all the things that you've identified that you need, what's a way to make it happen? Calendar blocking is a really great tool to get deep work done. So deep work is that work you need for focus and productivity. So for me, any work that requires producing content requires me to be focused and concentrating. So I block off times of my calendar, times of the day where I know I can be most productive and only use my time for that. Don't check email, don't check Slack. Time just for that. That is how my brain naturally works. I would imagine that most of you, or most people aren't that early of risers, but my whole family is asleep at that time. I can't sleep in, so I'm embracing it. So what are some natural patterns that you see with yourself? How can you take advantage of this new reality and make it work? Night owls might need something on the other end of the spectrum. Given the amount of interruption that I have during the day, I try to have at least 2 hours blocked in the middle of the day for deep work. And so I try to do at least another 2 hours once a day. So some tips on your calendar, you can use the working hours tool on Google or Outlook to indicate what your working hours are by default. And so for me, I set up my working hours from 9 to 5:30. I know my most productive time happens between 5 and 7, but no one schedules meetings then, so I'm pretty safe. And I usually put in a note that says do not schedule on any other time that I'm working to time block. So I would warn not to overdo it though, because if you put do not schedule all over your calendar, you're gonna end up with a lot of questions about, hey, can I schedule a meeting for that time? So use with caution, but it can really be a lifesaver. And then if you find that your colleagues don't understand it or don't honor it, use it as an opportunity to kind of talk with them about how you're trying to manage your time, and maybe they'll think it's a way that they can manage their own as well. Another technique in using time blocking is the Pomodoro Technique. So I guess it is named after an Italian timer that looks like a tomato, and many of our folks in our organization swear by it. So there are 6 steps to this technique. Step one is deciding on what task you need to be done. Then set a timer, a Pomodoro timer, which is traditionally for about 25 minutes. You work on the task, and then at the end of the timer rings, you put a check mark on a piece of paper. And if you have fewer than 4 check marks, you take a short break for 3 to 5 minutes, and then you go back up to step 2. And by the time you've had 4 Pomodoros, you take a longer break of 15 to 30 minutes and reset your check mark to 0, and then go back to step 1 and start on a new task. So you might find this approach is really helpful because it builds in breaks. It keeps you really focused on one task at a time, and it is a way to really be productive and get some work done. Okay, so setting up your best environment. So 3 things to think about here, which is negotiation of your space, the tools of the trade, and thinking beyond wearing pants. So think about who you share your space with: roommates, partners, children, pets. I'm sure that some of these things people have come up as lists on your distractions as well. So think about what you need to do to carve out your workspace. So according to a recent New York Times article, the best thing you can do is have a room with a door on it for effective remote work. That's great, but most of us probably don't have that luxury. If you do, you can take advantage of it. But since we're all in this together right now, there's probably more flexibility than we've ever seen. And we'll talk about kind of extending compassion about these situations a little bit later. So when negotiating your space, consider having a sit down with the folks you live with. What do you need to do to ensure that you and they have what they need to be successful? So maybe show them our self-assessment that I just shared with you. Perhaps you can determine that natural light is really important to your roommate, but you're comfortable working in a darker room, so you divide it up that way. Or if you both need the sunny kitchen, you both wear noise-canceling headphones. It's a time to reset and talk about expectations for noise, cleanliness, decor, and how will you communicate with one another now that you're co-workers? You're going to text? How are you going to open are you going to be to interruption? With kids, depending on ages, you might need some variations. So for me, I put a red, yellow, or green sign on the back of my chair to help the little ones know when I am busy or when I can be interrupted briefly, or if it's okay to ask for screen time for the 500th time today. If you don't have a physical door that can help, another practice is making sure that the kids see that they're important on your schedule too, and do what you can to block out breaks for them throughout the day if possible. Pets are the least able to be negotiated with or placated with screen time. However, they're probably just thrilled you're around and they want a nap on you. But still, again, scheduling the breaks so you can take them out for a walk will do you and them a lot of good. So thinking about the tools of the trade and what you need to set up your best environment. Most of you had little notice to get your home workspace set up and designed to be effective. So at 8th Light, our 100% remote folks strongly recommend getting great chairs and great monitors. I suspect many of you, like me, weren't able to bring your steel case chair home with you. So what do you do then? Pillows for lumbar support, a steady footrest is helpful. We've had some strong recommendation for IKEA desks and IKEA desk hacks because they're fairly inexpensive and can be delivered. So our international folks love them because IKEA is the same everywhere and you can swap out replacement parts easily. So those are some strong recommendations from our team. And if you're setting up your own workspace, you've probably seen things like this before, right? Which makes recommendations about the proper positioning of keyboard and monitor, beat, and making sure that you've got support. So if you have to hack it together, at least you can do it with this in mind. So some other additional important tools of the trade: get the best internet you possibly can, but know that if you've got situations where it's eating up your bandwidth, it might be okay for you to turn off your video for a meeting if you need to. Think about getting an external monitor or mouse or keyboard to just help with posture and positioning. And also noise canceling headphones are a godsend from our remote folks. And then thinking about how to set up a great interaction when you're working virtually. So I like to think about this as beyond wearing pants. So every blog and webinar probably that you've been to says you need to wear pants. This is generally great advice, although, and many recommend getting dressed like you normally would to go to the office. I'm going to say something controversial, but I think it's fine to wear comfy PJ pants. Do it. Your video meetings aren't requiring you to get up and move around. I think it's fine. If it helps you to get up and get dressed like you would on a normal day, that's great. But we all have our own way of coping with the current situation. So just, make sure that you're comfortable. You've got a second to the comfy pants. Thanks, Nicole. And beyond that, if you go into your booklet, you'll see a checklist that lists out some things to think about when you're getting on to remote calls. So making sure you're downloaded the software, as one of the folks on the chat mentioned, right? Like there's so many different tools that folks are using. You got to make sure that it's up and running, doing the sound check and mic check before the meeting gets started. Also just doing a scan for what's behind you and making sure that you don't have laundry in the background, or you're not backing up to your toilet or something that's showing that you don't want to show in your background. Or of course you can use the settings that I know Zoom has that gives you a cool virtual background, which are always exciting. Other things to just be thinking about is as you're setting up your meetings, that you've had conversations with your family, letting them know that you're going on a call, but those things are sort of outside of your control. So do the best that you can. So some additional tips and tricks. So taking those short, frequent breaks, as I mentioned earlier, setting work boundaries. So what do you need to start and end your day successfully? So what's a ritual that helps you start and end your day? My desk is in the living room, so I need to physically put my computer in my desk so it isn't calling me to work after hours. So think about those rituals that you might want to put into place. We also recommend to default to video on, but don't judge if the video is off. So Brian Porter, who's one of my colleagues, recommended this because you never know what's going on in a person's home. So it's nice to be able to come with your video on if you can, but don't judge or call out other people if they don't have it on, because you don't know what's going on there. So that is just an important consideration when you're coming up with norms for your team about how you'll interact. And then finally, consider productivity apps to help you with focus. So our Madison team recommends the Tides app, which has got some great background for focusing. It has a built-in Pomodoro method. So those might be some interesting tools that you might want to consider. So before I move on from kind of the tips and tricks and tools for setting up a good environment, does anyone have any questions? All right. So now we'll talk about strategies for communication and collaboration. All right, so now I would love for everyone to, I won't call on you, I promise, but can I have a virtual show of hands of how do you think, are you generally doing the best with, doing the best you can with the resources that you can have? So show of hands there. All right. Lots of hands raised there. Now, thinking about other people, do you think your colleagues are generally doing the best that they can with the resources that they have? Okay, good. About the same. So that is that's great because we've all got so much going on right now, and it makes communication difficult. Communication's already tough, and it's even tougher in this environment. So we want to encourage people to assume the best possible intent when you're communicating with your colleagues. So what do you do if you receive an email or a direct message that rubs you the wrong way? What can you do? Do you respond back with a tone equally as scathing as you perceive that tone? What happens then? It's on, right? You end up in a flame and direct message war, and it ends up with escalation. But there's got to be a better way. So for remote work, we encourage you to assume best possible intent in all conversations. So to do that, there's a few things to think about. So avoid fundamental attribution error. So what this is if a team member makes a mistake, we're more likely to attribute it to their personality, their character, or skill level. But if we make the same mistake, we're more likely to judge it by the situation and say, oh, well, there's something going on. We know that that's not true, of course, right? So if there's something going on with us, it's probably likely that other folks have outside situations going on. So maybe instead get curious. Is it possible that you read the tone of the communication wrong? Does the behavior that's getting under your skin, is that unusual or normal for your relationship? And if it's unusual, maybe that person's just having a tough day. So perhaps you can quickly check in with a video call or chat. If it's usually how the person communicates, it's in your best interest to try and de-escalate the situation. And again, a call is a good way to get clarification. Also check your assumptions. What does your colleague actually mean? So consider double checking. So a long time ago, when I worked as a market researcher at Nielsen, the head of our client division sent out an email on a Friday at 4:30 with asking for a quick analysis of our product's performance for the week ASAP. So my manager and I worked into the evening to pull together a polished presentation ASAP and sent it to him at 8:30 p.m. on a Friday night. We were pretty annoyed that we had to do this. And his response was, thanks, but didn't you have something better to do on Friday night? We were a little bit surprised and asked, but you said you needed it ASAP. And his response was, yes, as soon as possible, like sometime next week. And I just need a quick analysis, a paragraph would have been fine. So again, that checking of assumptions and understanding what folks really mean is an important lesson, I think, to learn, and something that I learned early and keep relearning time and time again over my career. So this article has been circulating around, and it's on Harvard Business Review. And this is talking about the discomfort that you're feeling right now is grief. So the article, you can get it out on HBR. They lifted their paywall on Corona content, so I'd encourage you to check it out. So the article explains that we have kind of collective grief over the sense of normalcy, the fear about what's going to happen in the economy, the loss of connection. Also, we're just kind of imagining something bad is coming, it is, right? There's this virus, it's confusing for folks, and our primitive mind knows that this bad thing is happening, but we can't see what's happening. So we just have less sense of security. And as groups and as individuals, we're kind of feeling all this together. And so when folks are grieving, what do you do? In situations when you know a colleague is going through grief, what do you normally do? You ask, how can you help? You listen, you're extra kind, and in short, you show your compassion for them. So I like this quote from the article, right? Stock up on compassion. Everyone will have different levels of fear and grief, and it manifests in different ways. He mentioned that a coworker had gotten very snippy with him, and he thought that's not like them. That's how they're dealing with this particular situation. So everything that you're seeing is maybe fear and anxiety. So being patient with folks is really important in this moment. So you have a dog barking in the background, a kid having a meltdown, doesn't matter. We're all in the same situation together. So this is an opportunity for us to suspend judgment and practice compassion with one another. And hopefully the silver lining is we're able to learn from this and extend that in normal times as well. Practically though, communication is hard, so over communicate. So be clear about when you're going to be around or not. The status feature in your direct messaging tool, your calendar, out of office can really clearly communicate where you're going to be when. And also just knowing that, you know, labeling your calendar and being clear about ins and outs. I have a workplace that's super respectful, and I had others that are less. But as a working parent, I really work hard to normalize activities. So I'll put doctor's appointments on my calendar. Right now I've got like scheduled walks with my kiddos on the calendar as a way of communicating my time. And work-life balance isn't just for parents, right? You have caregiving, responsibility for kids, roommates, aging parents, partners, friends. We all have a ton on our place, and it's tricky to balance for everyone. Also, just over communicating on deadlines. So if your manager is new to this remote thing and not particularly good at it, know that they might be uncomfortable, right? So talk to them about your plans. Talk about how you want to check in with them. Think about a cadence that can work well for both of you. If you've got somebody who's got micromanagement tendencies, how can you actively manage them to let them know when you're going to tell them what you're going to be doing? If you feel yourself slip behind, communicate to your team early and let them know. Also, think about who you can reach out to for help if you're stuck on something for more than 30 minutes. This is advice we give our apprentices here at 8th Light. If you're stuck on something for more than 30 minutes, you've done some research to solve the problem and can't, reach out to someone and see if they can help you. At 8th Light, we have a support line, which is watched by all of our developers. And when folks get stuck, they throw their questions in there and very quickly get responses. So is that a community of some sort that you might be able to create at your organization? So any questions on that? Okay, so next I just wanted to talk about some tips on emojis. So you know, nonverbal intent is really hard to hear. So don't skip on emojis and use them to express empathy and tone. Now, I am a grizzled Gen Xer. I was really slow to adopt emojis, but they've grown on me for sure. So looking at these communications, just following up on the status of scheduling that meeting, let me know. Well, if I saw that, I would think, oh gosh, I'm in big trouble. The second one, hey, Stacey, just following up on the status of scheduling that meeting. Please let me know when you have a minute. Okay, like that's better. I feel pretty good, like that I'm not in trouble, but that's a lot of words for an individual. And then this, right? Hey, Stacey, please let me know meeting status when you have a chance, and the little nerd emoji. So for me, that feels, and I'm interpreting that as, friendly and lightweight, and the person feels like a little bit of a nerd for hunting me down. So, but note though, as one of my colleagues pointed out, that emojis, we have to be really mindful because people on different cultural backgrounds will interpret them differently. So the slightly smiling emoji is not a sign of happiness in all countries. So in China, it implies distrust, disbelief, or someone's humoring you. It also can, be conceived or be understood as an ironic tone. So that's something to be aware of, as well as hand signals. They have different meanings in different languages. The OK sign or the V for victory have very different meanings in other countries, as well as the thumbs up. So still use your words and think about using emojis as a little bit of flair. Next, just talking about the joys of async communication. This is really wonderful because it allows you to respond during deep work or outside of deep work, and allows you to prioritize that deep work and use your communication and Slack and email kind of not setting yourself up to be just waiting for that next Slack message or setting the expectation that you're going to respond quickly. So some tips there is just consider status updates as an async tool, not having to get together to talk about status, and give your team a chance to respond as they arrive to work. Try to identify ways for you to gotten a hold of in a true emergency and define what that is. And then just batching how often you take a look at email and Slack can go a long way to setting you up for success. And I think a lot of us mentioned in the drawbacks of remote work is this difficulty of staying connected. So one great piece of advice in a webinar I recently attended was just leaving time for conversations. Don't just jump in. Give people the chance to talk and say hello, just like they naturally would in an in-person meeting. Also, think about using your video chats for regular and more frequent one-on-ones. So working close is working with folks and being able to work face-to-face is really important. And then thinking out about other ways you can reach out to coworkers. We've got at 8th Light virtual game night, we have virtual lunches, happy hours, and people have been just reaching out to one another and trying to establish some of these new norms. I have a question from Rachel. Acknowledging that the support hotline is awesome, but intimidating or doesn't work for some folks. Going back to empathy and giving people the benefit of the doubt. Rachel, I think that's a really great point, right? Some people are not comfortable putting themselves out there and saying like, I don't know something in front of a big group of people like our support line. And so in that case, I encourage first for folks who are running the Slack line, the Slack channels to of course be always encouraging and like responsive and having the right tone to ensure that people feel welcome there. I think the second thing is if you're the kind of person who might be more intimidated to reach out, thinking about like other folks that you could go to, mentors, or identifying if you know who the expert is, just going to them one-on-one is another way that you might be able to engage and get the support that you need. And then finally, I would really encourage, and I've sent an example of one of these in the PDF that we created, but thinking about introducing team agreements. So thinking about any project team you're working on, setting up a structure, right? So we do this for all of our teams at 8th Light. We ask, how will we work together? And each agreement includes, how are we going to communicate? How are documents going to be stored? What kinds of decisions can be made and by whom and how? Are there norms about hours? Are there norms about just anything related to communicating when you're out and how you'll work together? So I encourage folks to consider adopting those agreements, because they can really help get some of that awkward communication out of the way and get teams up and running quickly. And I'll just end today with this quote that I cannot find who it's attributed to. It's been floating around on Twitter, and I think it's amazing. So remember, you're not working from home. You're at home during a crisis trying to work. So we're all in this working really hard to do the very best we can. So I hope everyone will extend each other compassion and do what you can to make the best out of this unique time that we're in. So thanks everyone for attending. If you have any questions, feel free to stick around or Slack them. And I really appreciate all of your time and attendance.
Stacey, there's a question in the Q&A. What's the name of the Focus app that was recommended?
Oh, Tides. TIDES.
Thank you.